questions. I'm super excited to talk about this because Datawrapper has done this for me, which I promise it will do for you. It's helped remove a lot of cruft from my life, from my team's life, so that we can focus on cool, original, bespoke things. And I think, yeah, I'm just so grateful it exists. Thank you all. So, as Elliot mentioned, I am the America's graphics editor at Reuters, which means I run a team of graphics journalists that covers news from the top of Canada down to the tip of Argentina. So, a pretty broad direction. But before I was that, before Datawrapper, as Elliot mentioned, he and I go way, way, way back. So here is us trying to, after a long cross country journey to get to SourceCon, a news conference, where you can see me and Elliot hanging out. I had more embarrassing photos, Elliot. You should be happy I went with this one. And our friend Andrew and somebody else we're going to get back to later. He will show up again. So a little bit about how I came to be a Datawrapper user, advocate, acolyte. I was first introduced to Datawrapper when I was teaching at the graduate journalism school at CUNY, where it was used to teach the students how to make charts for the first time. And it was so exciting. I had seen charting tools before, but it really did democratize charting. These journalism students were inundated with all these new tools, and they were really able to dive in, and we could put aside technical things and really just focus on what it meant to make a good data visualization. And so I was pretty excited about that. And then I went to work at FiveThirtyEight, where we had an internal charting tool. But when I became the head of the data visualization team there, one of the first things I pushed through was retiring that tool and switching to Datawrapper. Talk about this a little more later, but that internal tool is just not worth it. And I think it's pretty easily the biggest legacy I'll have left on a newsroom, switching that tool over. It made a world of a difference. And then I came to Reuters, where they were already on Datawrapper, but because it's an enormous newsroom, I am still onboarding people constantly. I support our newsroom, think of new ways to make the tool work for us. So what I wanted to talk about today was my experience onboarding at FiveThirtyEight when it was a small newsroom and it was totally new, and at Reuters, where it's an enormous global newsroom. The challenges are a little different at those two places, but hopefully I have some advice if you're already on that journey or you're thinking about taking that step, some tips from my experience of doing that. So I'll start with the small newsroom experience first. When you're introducing a small newsroom to Datawrapper, or just a newsroom for the very first time that's never used it before. The first thing I did was really work to build consensus early. I felt pretty strongly we were switching to Datawrapper one way or another, but I didn't tell the whole newsroom that. I got some of the reporters who liked helping us with charts. I got the copy editors to play with the free tool and let them believe that they had a lot of say with whether or not we went ahead with it. Because I trusted correctly that once they spent time with the tool, they would be really excited and they would back me up in that this was something we had to do. So by the time the tool came around, everybody felt like they had been a part of bringing that on board, which meant that, with any new tool, there's going to be some bumps, but people just really viewed those through good, optimistic, excited lens. And if, the people who hadn't maybe been brought on early, they didn't just have the graphics team advocating for it. They had people from different directions saying, no, this is great for us. The other thing I would suggest, which I didn't do right away and I wish I had, would be to commit to a project management system if you're going to be bringing this on for the first time. The Datawrapper folks are so wonderfully flexible. They'll work in whatever thing you want. They're not going to make you submit Jira tickets or whatever if you've worked with different groups before, which is great in theory, but there is so many little details that go into making sure that the Datawrapper built for your newsroom has everything your newsroom needs. At FiveThirtyEight, we had a very specific style we wanted to meet, which required a lot of back and forth tweaking. And I wish from the very beginning I had set up a really rigorous Notion board or GitHub project board or whatever your tool of choice is. That just would have made it easier to keep track of that stuff. We did eventually switch over there, and I think the Datawrapper folks were happy we did. That would be one tip. You are the one starting from the ground up. The other thing Datawrapper will offer you is the ability to lock some features down. And this is really going to vary newsroom to newsroom. But you should think very thoughtfully about what chart types you want, any particular use cases of those. Something that we deal with a lot at Reuters is reporters using the small multiple pie charts to make overtime pie charts. And so we've talked about maybe just removing that charting ability completely. You know, if you think that there's some chart types that your newsroom might make and you don't want to have to look over their shoulder at every single chart, you can remove features. Uh, the last is that in these early days, and especially in a small newsroom where you can do this, um, as many quick, let me show you that, let me hop on a call with you as you can with different people who are using the tool. I highly recommend. I've brought so many people on board because it's a lot more exciting to watch me do something and feel like they can do it too than to try to bump around in a tool or not know what's possible or not have those ideas. And so those early days, anytime somebody would ask me for help, I wouldn't just do it for them. I would say, let me show you. And we'd either be in person pre-COVID or hop on a call because that really got them excited and also let them start fixing things for themselves in the future. Finally, accept Datawrapper's wonderful help. They have fantastic newsroom training, which they ran for us at 538 and brought a lot of people on board. One thing that Elena had said to me at the time, and really stuck with me when I asked her for advice on this, was that a lot of people think they have to be tier 1 customer support for their newsroom, but you don't have to be. Datawrapper will do that for you. Obviously, there's the fantastic Datawrapper Academy documentation, but also in a small newsroom, if you're on Slack, they'll make a collaborative Slack channel. I would start just sending, if I couldn't help a reporter, or I was busy, I would say just post in the Datawrapper Slack and somebody would get back to them. And so realizing that I didn't have to carry that weight was huge. That was my quick lightning talk of the small newsroom. I'm trying to move quickly because I know we don't have a ton of time, and I want to make sure that if anybody is going through this now, they have time for questions. So the other half of this experience for me has been rolling onboarding at Reuters, which is a completely different challenge than 538. The tool's already there. We're on the enterprise level, but Reuters is a enormous global newsroom with people constantly joining or people who have been there for 20 years hearing about Datawrapper for the first time because you can do all of the promotion you want, but in a newsroom that big and that spread out, lots of people won't even know it exists. And so I've learned a lot in the few years I've been at Reuters that have made things a lot better and made our charts, our Datawrapper usage better. Internal docs and email templates for the big newsroom is so important. Datawrapper has fantastic documentation, but it's not designed for your newsroom. We, for example, are a wire service with a whole other CMS just for our wire. We have rigged Datawrapper to publish directly to the wire. We have all sorts of technical things that aren't going to show up in Datawrapper's documentation, and it would be a nightmare to keep walking people through that stuff all the time. And finally, it took me too long to do this, but I finally created an email template because the way that we add new users is they send to our listserv. And I was writing the same text over and over to say, I've added you, here is our link. And you can see on the left what that goes to of our own documentation, including a link to Datawrapper documentation themselves. And also, in a small newsroom, I didn't have to worry about my colleagues remembering that I'm a real person and not, an AI chatbot or something. But in a large newsroom, sometimes I try to think about ways to add a little bit more humanity to the Datawrapper stuff so they don't think that, they know there's actual people using this tool. They can ask for help. They can get excited about it. The opposite of the small newsroom, you can't have quick, let me just show you for every single person because there's tons of people in the newsroom and that would be all your time. So what I try to do instead is I identify people in different parts of the newsroom who are doing cool things with Datawrapper, are really interested in pushing how they use it, and I spend a lot of time with them. And those people have started spending a lot of time with the people on their teams. And they are, I had a desk editor who's been at Reuters for 20 years, no technical experience, who's one of these people for me. And he did a map of the fire in Texas, where he found the GeoJSON, downloaded it, uploaded it to Datawrapper, the kind of thing that I would have thought 5 years ago only the graphics team would get to that level of complexity. But he and I had spent so much time with the tool, and I assured him, that's something you can do. You don't have to be able to open that file. Just look for that .geojson, and the map ended up turning out fantastic. So, and he now helps the desk debug and handle and all that stuff, which has been great. As an example, I pulled all of our users and I sorted them by how many charts they've made. Number one is Ben Welsh. He and John are talking tomorrow, I think, about automated charts. So if you wonder why he's at 21K and everybody else is in the hundreds, thousands, you should go to his talk. But I have two people in here in our top 5, top 6 who are not even on the graphics team, but they make so many charts. They use Datawrapper just for their own exploratory reporting, but also for publishing. And that tells you how much this chart has meant for us, because those are charts pre-Datawrapper they would have been asking our team to help with. Find your people who are in production. When you're running trainings and in a big newsroom, you're going to run a lot of trainings. And whenever possible, bring somebody from production with you. Whoever it is, the desk, copy editor, a specific production team, whoever actually puts stories together, they're going to know better than you what the common pitfalls are, because a lot of graphics teams, the Reuters team included, we don't actually use the Reuters CMS and all that. We have our own server. So I don't know that much about how to debug when there's issues embedding a Datawrapper chart there. The production team does. And also, graphics teams seem very mysterious and technical to some folks in a giant newsroom. So they don't necessarily believe us when we say it's an easy to use tool. But when they hear that directly from the mouth of a desk editor or copy editor, someone they trust, saying, no, this tool is really easy, you can figure this out, I've found they're a lot more likely to be less terrified and give it a go. One more talk for Ben, plug for Ben and John's talk, Datawrapper's API. It has taken so much work off of our plate automating Datawrapper charts, because we had to do the jobs report, earnings reports, Fed stuff. I mean, that's just my region. But every region has their own cyclical financial, whatever charts that are happening constantly. And since we started automating those, that's just a lot of work that nobody in the newsroom has to do. We can tell reporters, don't worry. We actually had somebody from the legal team ask for some help on making job state charts for the legal sector. And I was like, oh, let me connect you to Ben, who already automates a bunch of those charts, and he can just add one for legal. You'll never have to make this chart again. He was pretty excited. Okay. That's how you can bring Datawrapper to your small newsroom or to your big newsroom. Very quickly, why should you bring Datawrapper to your newsroom? Your graphics team is magic. They have skills that nobody else has. They can code, they can draw, they can map, they can write, they can report, they can do 18 different things. Do not have them spending their time making bar charts. Because the thing that I believe sets the great graphics teams apart from the good graphics teams is largely determined by how much cruft you keep off their plates. And so if you can get those daily charts away from them, if you can get maintenance of stuff away from them, if you can turn more reporters to the tool, more automation of the tool, that means your team is doing more original, bespoke graphics journalism that no one else is doing. And that is a much better use of their time and your team. Internal tools are too much work. Elliot and I can tell you all about the joys of the journal's internal charting tool. and the maintenance of that and asking for help on maintaining that. At 538, it was the same thing. Before I was at Reuters, they had a tool and it's basically become somebody's full-time job to support, but probably somebody who does not have a background in software, who does not have the setup the Datawrapper has. You're not going to end up saving money when you end up needing employees spending, full time maintaining a tool or not maintaining the tool, which begins to fall apart and have a million bugs and not do what you need. So, yeah, don't have an internal tool. Use Datawrapper. It's great. One last thing, it's great for collaboration. That person who I said would come back, this was a very important email. We sent the Datawrapper team about a project we were working on together, which was our child, because the wonderful people at Reuters sent me and him this great onesie that you'll have to get the file from somebody at Reuters. I don't know if the Datawrapper folks have it. And it was really cute and sweet. And that's it. That was 15 minutes, supposed to be 20, but I said maybe I could leave time for more questions. So yes, I would love if anybody has been working on this or has any questions about what it's like to onboard Datawrapper into your newsroom, big or small. I'd love to, or teach with it. I'd love to talk about that because I love Datawrapper. Thank you, Datawrapper people.
Thanks so much, Julia. That baby rack was one of the best things that's ever landed in my inbox, I have to say.
When I allow non-graphics people to make graphics, how do I maintain quality? This is such a good question. When I was at 538, we were a small newsroom, so we reviewed every single chart. And it still went through a chart edit. And that was possible at 538 because we published 5 stories a day and not every story had a chart in it. That's not possible at Reuters. We have taken a bit of a calculated risk in that we don't have a formal review system other than we can look at all the Datawrapper charts. What we do is nothing automatically moves to clients. We have to manually, the graphics team has to approve to move it to clients. But it does mean that charts can end up on Reuters.com that we are not wild about. And that gets me to my point about locking some things down. I think in retrospect, maybe we should go back to the Datawrapper folks and turn off some charts that I see some problem.
I wanted to jump in with a question of my own, which is, what would you say to someone worried that putting charting tools in the hands of reporters might result in a kind of reduced quality of charts?
It does. I mean, yeah, like that's the trade-off, right? I mean, I think if I look at the charts made by my team, if we didn't let the newsroom make charts and only we made charts, the charts on Reuters would be better. There would be 1/50th of them. The reality is that we are a small team in a large newsroom, which is true, I think, for most graphics teams relative to the size of their newsroom. And I think it's a choice as an editor. You're always deciding where to spend your time. And I just really strongly believe that your graphics team's time is better spent on the high value work only they can do and let some mediocre charts go through. Like when we can help out, we will. I really encourage people always to reach out if they're not sure if something's working. Luckily we've trained up enough of the desk to help us with any of the like big misleading problematic charts. But yeah, do I see some spaghetti charts with 30 colors sometimes? Sure. Like, do I see some things we would have done differently? Yes. But to brag a little, the Reuters graphics team was named by 2 different orgs last year the best team in the world. And I think part of how we reach that milestone is that we just don't spend time on things that other people can do for us.
Let's see. Laura asks, when someone from outside the graphics team makes a chart, is there any supervision? And do you set boundaries on which types of charts the non-graphics members can do? For example, only tables and bar charts, or do they have freedom to create?
Yeah, there is not any official supervision other than the fact that it'll go through an edit from their editor and from the copy desk, like the story itself. So there is in that sense, but there isn't necessarily chart supervision. Again, this is different at 538. If you're in a small newsroom and you can look at every single chart, great. But we couldn't do that at Reuters. Um, This one said we don't currently lock down anything, at least on the news side. I think Datawrapper might have some charts for other kinds of clients. But if I was going to, honestly, the only one I would probably lock down is the small multiple pie charts because that's the only one I've seen. And I'm not like a pie chart hater, but I've seen some wild uses of that one. And I'm not sure the newsroom needs that one. So if we're going to lock down, I think that would be the one.
Okay, so another question from Patricia asks, what other tools did you use in your team?
Um, what tools do we use? I mean, we don't use a ton of we use Blender is a free 3D modeling tool for some of our 3D. Again, that's specifically the graphics team. The newsroom is not using Blender. Um we I use the programming language R, so I use R Studio to make charts sometimes. Although I will say Datawrapper's small multiple line feature has made R suddenly less important for my workflow because I think that was the moment I would switch out of Datawrapper and into R. We use Illustrator, of course. I mean, with Datawrapper, you can export to SVG. So often a workflow for us will be using Datawrapper to get the data in and then bring it into Illustrator to touch it up or do something special. Otherwise, we're doing a lot of custom coding in JavaScript with Svelte, which is what our rig is built on, which is stuff that we have time for because of Datawrapper.
Great. All right. Here's a classic question from Connie. Do you have tips about getting non-graphics folks to use the tool? There's sometimes a gap between
Mhm.
who I train and who actually makes charts.
Yes. Yeah. And again, I mean, that really varies to my mind on the size of your newsroom. I think if it's the small newsroom, get on the call with as many people as you possibly can. And if people who haven't reached out to you much, just say, I'd love to see how you're using it. Tougher on the big newsroom. So there, you can see in Datawrapper, if you're saying who I'm training and who's using it, you can see in Datawrapper who's using it a lot. So you can reach out to those folks proactively. I think that whole like be human thing I shared, that's been really important because um, Reuters is huge. They don't know who's friendly, who's helpful. And I try to be very super friendly whenever I do those things and remind them like, I'm here if you have any questions. I'll do a lot of demos where somebody's struggling that I think I can help them with. I make them watch me turn a math chart into a great one only using Datawrapper. And like, there's something so soothing about watching someone who's good at something do it. So that often gets them very excited about Datawrapper and makes them realize. And it just gives me a chance to teach a lot of like data viz 101 stuff. Um, but the other thing is like, don't worry about like some people just won't really use it. And that's okay. Like, I think that's the other thing. It's great that we have it, but I'm not out there trying to make every reporter put data wrapper charts in their stories. I'm just trying to make the ones that want charts in their stories bug us less.
Great. I've got a next question is from Natasia. I hope I said that correctly. Hi, Julia. Fantastic speech. Do you use some kind of template system for people outside of the graphics team?
Um, no, I mean we have. I think when you bring data wrapper into your newsroom on the paid accounts, they will style the charts. So we do have a template in that sense that all of our charts come in the Reuters fonts. We have some default colors for them to choose from. We have the way that we format our dateline and notes and all that um, is in our template. And that was the same thing for 538. That's why like that PMing process was so important because getting the styles just right was a lot of back and forth. But now the template is just when they go to make a new chart in Data Wrapper, it comes with all that stuff.
Great. We have time for a few more questions. I see one from Gregor from Datawrapper,
Hi, Gregor.
who says, I'm curious if you experienced any cases where people in the newsroom showed forms of resistance to being forced to use a new tool being introduced in a sort of top-down way.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's why in the small newsroom I did that before Data Wrapper was officially brought on board. I made several people, including some people who I knew would love it and some people who I expected that resistance from, brought them on before we had signed up Data Wrapper, so that they felt like they had the chance to discuss concerns. And honestly, at the risk of sounding like a shill, it's such a good tool that once people use it, the resistance tends to go away. And because there's a free version of the tool, you can get people using it right away. At Reuters, I think I just go back to that voluntary aspect when people seem stressed. I know the reporters are really under a lot of stress. And so if they feel like I don't have time for this right now, I say, that's fine. We also don't have time to make a chart for you. So then your story just won't have a chart in it. But I am not somebody that believes every news story has to have a chart in it. So I think when they realize nobody's going to force it down their throat, it's just another option for them. I can see the resistance melt away and then they might give it a shot when they're, less busy.
Every news story needing a chart. I've never heard that idea before in my life.
Ugh. You have only worked with better editors than me, Ellie. There are some people outside of graphics teams who think apparently that's a good goal.
Okay, the question from Will. Do you give the non-graphics people a data visualization style guide, or do you communicate best practices in other ways?
So the style guide, we don't have to do as much because the base styles are built into Datawrapper, thankfully, and the bounds of Datawrapper keep them from going too wild. But we do have in our documentation a DataViz 101 talk that we give a lot. So we have different data wrapper trainings that we give, but whenever we give any data wrapper training, we always make some time at least to just the big things we want people to know about charting, like some tips on color, some tips on, um, when to use certain chart forms, when to not, the things that we see a lot that we're more concerned about journalistically. And honestly, I send a lot of people to Lisa's writing on the Data Wrapper blog because that does a lot of the work for me. So, she has some great write ups about, um, you know, really picking your highlight colors cleverly and what a line chart is good for. So, we'll give those talks, but then additionally, I'll often send them a very specific article if they have follow up questions about that from Lisa.
Cool. Another question here. We're almost at the end of our slot, but lots of great questions coming in. Richard asks, how quickly do journalists publish their charts after a non-scheduled news event?
This is great. So fast, if they want to, because we have connected Data Wrapper directly um, to our wire, to our CMS. So when they hit the Data Wrapper publish button, it goes automatically into our internal CMS. So at that point, the desk can themselves move it to the wire. There's also an option that just the graphics team can use from Data Wrapper to even skip that and immediately push it live to the wire. So as quickly as they can make a chart in Data Wrapper, which is very quickly, it can be on Reuters.com. It can be to our clients. Um, it's lovely.
Okay, well, I think that is all the questions in chat. Um, Thanks so much, Julia, for coming in.
Thank you.
Um,
Good to see you again, Elliot.
yes, you too.